I stared at my father in disbelief, the air around me turning thick and suffocating. The dining room, once a place of warmth and family dinners, now felt like a courtroom where my fate had just been sealed. My father, the man whose company I had single-handedly saved from complete financial ruin, had just said the words that would change everything. Emily will be taking over now. At first, I thought I had misheard him. Maybe my exhaustion was playing tricks on me. The endless nights, the sleepless weeks, the thousands of hours I had poured into developing the software that saved this company, all of it had been for this? I forced a smile, waiting for the punchline, waiting for someone, anyone, to say it was just a bad joke. But no one laughed. My father simply kept eating, cutting his steak into precise, deliberate slices as if he hadn't just shattered my entire world. My mother sat stiffly in her chair, her eyes darting nervously between me and my father, her lips pressed into a thin, uncertain line. She wasn't going to stand up for me. She never did. And then there was Emily, my sister, sitting across from me in a designer dress, her manicured fingers swirling a glass of wine, her lips curving into the smallest, most infuriating smile. She had done nothing, absolutely nothing to help when Caldwell Enterprises was on the verge of collapse. While I had been hunched over my laptop, running on coffee and sheer determination, she had been on yachts, attending brunches, spending the family's dwindling fortune like it would never run out. And now, she was getting everything. I forced my voice to stay calm, steady, controlled. "What do you mean Emily will own the company?" Dad finally looked up from his plate, sighing like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Lauren, let's be realistic." He said it so casually, as if he wasn't about to rip everything away from me. "You're great at technical things, but leadership? That's not your strength. We need someone with presence, someone who commands respect." His eyes flicked to Emily, as if she was that someone. My stomach twisted. I developed the software that saved this company from bankruptcy. I built the system that turned it into a multi-million-dollar powerhouse. I worked while they slept, planned while they partied, built while they stood back, and watched. "Without me, there wouldn't even be a company to pass down," I said, my voice sharper than before. My father chuckled, like my words were amusing. Then, without a second thought, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and tossed a crumpled $50 bill onto the table. "For your effort." For a moment, I just stared at it. $50. $50 for the sacrifices I had made, for the nights I had spent awake, fixing problems they didn't even know existed, for the technology that had saved their legacy. $50 for betrayal. Emily let out a soft chuckle, barely hiding her amusement. Mom shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. No one did. I exhaled slowly, picking up the $50 bill between my fingers, turning it over as if it was some kind of joke. Then I calmly folded it into my napkin. I stood up. "Lauren, don't be dramatic," Dad scoffed, waving a dismissive hand at me. I smiled, not because I was happy, because I had just made a decision. "I'm not being dramatic," I said. "I'm just excusing myself. Clearly, my role in this family is nothing more than a background character, so I'll remove myself from the scene." I walked away. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I didn't demand fairness. I simply left. The next morning, I arrived at work early, like always, like nothing had happened. Because if there was one thing I had learned from this family, it was that if you show weakness, they'll eat you alive. The moment I stepped into the office, I felt it. Something was wrong. Employees exchanged nervous glances as I walked by. Conversations hushed when they saw me. My stomach twisted into knots, but I kept walking, my heels clicking against the marble floor, my posture straight, controlled. And then I saw it. My office door, open. Inside, my desk had been emptied. My computer, gone. The nameplate that once read, "Lauren Caldwell, CTO," missing. And sitting in my chair, flipping through documents like she owned the place, was Emily. She looked up, flashing me a bright, artificial smile. "Oh, good morning, Lauren." Her voice was dripping with fake sweetness. "Didn't Dad tell you? I'll be moving into this office. You'll be reporting to me now." I felt my stomach drop, but my expression didn't waver. "What's my position?" Emily tilted her head, pretending to think. Then she shrugged. "We'll figure something out. Maybe something in IT support?" IT support for the company I built, for the software I created, for the legacy I saved. I exhaled, slow and measured, my pulse hammering in my ears. They wanted me out. They thought I would accept whatever scraps they tossed my way, maybe even beg to stay. They had no idea what was coming next. I gave her one last look, then I nodded. Understood. And I walked out. They thought they had won. They thought I would disappear quietly. They had no idea what I was about to do. I didn't fight back. Not yet. Instead, I watched. I took my tiny desk in the farthest corner of the office, surrounded by interns who didn't even know who I was. I let them believe they had pushed me aside, and I waited. It didn't take long to see what was happening. Emily was drowning. She spent her days in pointless meetings, making reckless decisions based on instinct rather than data. She ignored the department heads who actually knew what they were doing and replaced them with her equally clueless friends, people whose only qualification was knowing which wine paired best with which cheese. The company wasn't just vulnerable, it was on the brink of collapse. And I had built everything they were now destroying. So I made my decision. If they didn't want me at Caldwell Enterprises, I would build something bigger, something better. And when I was done, there wouldn't be anything left of their empire. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. Late at night, long after most of the employees had left the office, I sat in a dimly lit coffee shop, my fingers curled around a cup of lukewarm espresso. Across from me sat three of the most brilliant minds I had ever worked with, people who, like me, had been cast aside, undervalued, ignored. Jake, the former CFO, the man who had kept the company's books from sinking into oblivion when things got bad. He knew every financial loophole, every weak spot, every investor's pressure point. Maya, the best data analyst in the business, the woman who had practically built the customer profiling system from scratch, increasing efficiency by over 300%. She could predict trends before they even happened. And David, my closest ally, the only person in the entire company who understood my software as well as I did, because we had coded most of it together at 3 a.m., running on caffeine and desperation. All three of them had quietly resigned over the past month. They weren't idiots. They had seen the writing on the wall. Now they were sitting across from me, waiting. Jake leaned forward, his expression serious. So, what's the play here, Lauren? I exhaled, reaching into my bag and pulling out a folder. Inside were months of work, concepts, prototypes, projections. It was everything I had been building in secret. I slid it across the table. We build something new? I said simply. Maya flipped through the pages, her brows raising slightly. This is better than what Caldwell Enterprises had, she murmured. David let out a low whistle. This isn't just a new company, he said. This is an industry shakeup. Exactly, I nodded. They didn't need convincing. They were in. But there was one more thing, the thing my father and sister had overlooked in their arrogance. The software? Yes, it was under Caldwell Enterprises' name. But the original code, the most advanced version, the one I had been secretly improving, refining, strengthening, I had never uploaded it to their servers. It was still mine, and I was about to change everything. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I worked relentlessly, barely sleeping, coding through the night, perfecting the system until it was flawless. Meanwhile, Emily was floundering. Caldwell Enterprises was hemorrhaging money. The once proud industry leader was losing contracts left and right, and the company was spiraling toward another disaster, faster than before. And then, the first domino fell. A major client, one who had been with Caldwell Enterprises for over a decade, suddenly pulled their contract. Then another, and another. Emily panicked. She fired people at random, blaming everyone but herself. My father tried to scramble together a plan, but it was too late. Because while they were desperately trying to save a sinking ship, I was launching a rocket. My software, perfected. My pitch, flawless. Within 3 weeks, I had 3 offers. By the end of the month, I had a deal, a $50 million contract. And just like that, I wasn't just competing with Caldwell Enterprises, I was crushing them. They had no idea what was coming. The news broke like a shockwave across the industry. Caldwell Enterprises, once a powerhouse, was now seen as outdated, crumbling, on the verge of collapse. Meanwhile, my company, Nova Systems, was dominating. Clients were flocking to us. Investors were pouring money in. And then came the moment I had waited for. The Tech Innovators Gala, one of the biggest industry events of the year. Every major CEO, investor, and executive would be there. And this year, I was the guest of honor. As I walked into the grand ballroom, dressed in an elegant black gown, all eyes turned to me. The whispers started immediately. "That's Lauren Caldwell." "No, she runs Nova Systems now. Isn't her company worth $500 million? Didn't she take down her father's empire?" I ignored them, because there, in the back of the room, sat my father and sister. Emily's face was pale. My father looked like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. They had lost, and they knew it. I took my seat at the front of the room, sipping my champagne as the host took the stage. Tonight, we recognize the visionaries pushing the industry forward. One of the most groundbreaking innovators this year has transformed the way global corporations operate. Please welcome Lauren Caldwell, CEO of Nova Systems. The applause was deafening. I stood, walking toward the stage with quiet confidence, feeling every single step. When I reached the podium, I let my gaze sweep over the crowd. And then I met my father's eyes. He looked at me with something I had never seen before. Not anger, not arrogance, just defeat. I smiled, not out of spite, not out of revenge, but because, in that moment, I realized something. I never needed his approval. I never needed Caldwell Enterprises, because I had built something better. And this time, there was nothing they could do to stop me. 3 months had passed since Caldwell Enterprises began its downward spiral. 3 months since my company, Nova Systems, had established itself as the undisputed leader in the industry. Revenue exploding, market dominance over 60%. Caldwell Enterprises bleeding out. Their clients were jumping ship, their investors were panicking, and their stock had plummeted so fast that even the media had stopped bothering to report on it. The once proud empire my father had built was now a rotting corpse, collapsing under the weight of its own arrogance. And then, the inevitable happened. At exactly 10 a.m., my assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Lauren, your father and sister are here to see you." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. So it had finally come to this. "Send them in." They walked in like ghosts, a stark contrast to the powerful figures they once were. My father, once a towering presence, now looked smaller, weaker, older. The unshakable confidence he used to carry was gone, replaced by something I had never seen in him before. Desperation. Emily followed, her usual designer wardrobe flawless, but no amount of expensive fabric could hide the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw was clenched so tightly she looked like she might crack a tooth. They were no longer the ones in control. I was. My father took a slow breath. "Lauren, we need to talk." I gestured to the chairs in front of my desk. They hesitated, maybe because they knew, for the first time in their lives, they were stepping into my territory. But they sat. Emily shifted uncomfortably, her nails tapping against the armrest. She wouldn't even look at me. Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. "We've had our differences, but at the end of the day, we're family. Caldwell Enterprises is struggling. We need your help." There it was, the words he never thought he would say. I let the silence stretch, watching them squirm. "And what exactly are you asking me to do?" I asked finally, my voice calm, measured. Dad leaned forward, as if that would make his plea more convincing. "We're willing to offer you a leadership role, something meaningful. I realize now that we may have underestimated you." Underestimated me? The audacity of it. I tilted my head. "You realize now?" Emily finally looked up, her eyes flashing with irritation. "Lauren, don't be petty. We need you, okay?" I laughed. Actually laughed. "You need me?" I repeated, amusement dripping from my voice. "That's funny, because a year ago, you told me I wasn't leadership material. You told me I was only good for technical things." My father's jaw tightened. "You know how business works. Decisions were made, but now we have to move forward. If you come back, we can rebuild Caldwell Enterprises together." There it was again. Control. They didn't want me. They wanted to own me. "And what position are you offering?" I asked, feigning curiosity. Dad straightened his shoulders, ready to close the deal. "You'd be second in command," he said, "right beneath Emily." For a split second, the room was silent. Then I laughed again, louder this time. Emily flushed. "Lauren, grow up. You built some software? Fine. But that doesn't mean you know how to run a company at our level." I stopped laughing. My amusement vanished instantly. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the desk between us, and when I spoke, my voice was cold as ice. Emily, my company is worth $500 million. Yours is weeks away from bankruptcy. Explain to me again, which one of us doesn't know how to run a company? Silence. Pure, satisfying silence. Dad cleared his throat, shifting in his chair. Lauren, please. It was that word. Please. The same man who had dismissed me, belittled me, thrown money in my face like I was some underpaid employee instead of his own daughter, was now begging. And I had never felt more at peace. No. Emily stiffened. Excuse me? I said no, I repeated. I leaned back, crossing my arms. I don't need Caldwell Enterprises. You needed me, and you threw me away. You made your choice. Now, you get to live with it? Dad exhaled sharply, frustration creeping into his voice. You're seriously going to let your own family fail? I met his eyes. I didn't let anything happen. My voice was smooth, unwavering. You destroyed this company the moment you put Emily in charge. Emily pushed back from her chair, standing abruptly, her face red with anger. You're just bitter, she snapped. You've always been jealous of me. I gave her a slow, amused smile. Jealous, I said softly. Emily, I don't need to be jealous. I already have everything you wanted. I stood as well, smoothly adjusting my blouse, my movements calm, deliberate. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a real company to run. My father sat there, his lips pressed into a thin line, his last shred of pride barely holding him together. Emily stormed out, her heels clicking angrily against the floor, but before she disappeared through the door, she turned back. I hope you're happy, Lauren. I met her gaze, utterly calm, unwavering. I am... And then she was gone. The moment the doors closed behind them, I exhaled, letting the last of the tension slip from my shoulders. They thought they could walk in here, throw a few hollow apologies at me, and expect me to come running back to fix their mess. They had no idea who I had become, but as much as I enjoyed watching them squirm, I knew this wasn't over. Caldwell Enterprises was dying, and when a sinking ship goes down, it pulls everything and everyone with it. The question was, would I let that happen? The news broke 3 days later. Caldwell Enterprises had officially declared bankruptcy. It was everywhere. Business magazines, financial news networks, online forums, even national headlines had picked up the story. Former industry giant Caldwell Enterprises collapses overnight. Poor leadership decisions sink a $300 million company. How greed and family politics killed Caldwell Enterprises. And the best part? Every article credited the company's former success to me. They all pointed out the obvious, that the only reason Caldwell Enterprises had survived its first near collapse was because of the software I built. And once I was gone, it was only a matter of time before the entire thing crumbled. I was in a meeting when my assistant knocked on my office door, holding a printed document. Lauren, you might want to see this. I scanned the page quickly, my lips curving into a small smirk as I reached the last paragraph. Caldwell Enterprises was being liquidated. Everything was up for sale. The headquarters building, the remaining assets, even the Caldwell name itself. I tapped my fingers against the polished wood of my desk, considering my options. My father had overleveraged the company, taken out massive loans in a desperate bid to save it, and now the banks were seizing everything. And I could buy it. The poetic justice of it all was almost too perfect. That evening, as I sat in my penthouse apartment overlooking the city, I thought about what I really wanted. I had spent so much time proving myself, so much energy fighting against the people who dismissed me, betrayed me, belittled me. And now, I had already won. Did I really need to crush them further? I thought back to that night 1 year ago, when my father had tossed a crumpled $50 bill onto the table like a tip for a waitress. Like I was worth nothing. And just like that, my decision became crystal clear. The next morning, I picked up my phone and made the call my father never saw coming. The bankruptcy attorney answered on the second ring. This is Lauren Caldwell, I said smoothly. I'd like to place a direct bid on all Caldwell Enterprises assets. There was a pause on the other end. Including the name? He asked cautiously. I smiled. Especially the name. A week later, I sat in the very same boardroom my father had once ruled over like a king. Only this time, I was the one holding the crown. The paperwork was spread out before me, a sleek black and gold pen resting on top of the final contract. With a single signature, Caldwell Enterprises would belong to me. My father and sister sat across from me, both of them pale, silent, defeated. Dad looked like he had aged another decade in just 1 week. Emily wouldn't even meet my eyes. I picked up the pen, paused. Then I slid the documents back across the table. Dad blinked in confusion. "What is this?" he asked, his voice rough. "A counteroffer," I said simply. He picked up the papers, his eyes scanning the first page, and then they widened. Emily grabbed them from his hands, her voice shaking as she read aloud. "All remaining rights to the Caldwell name, patents, and intellectual property will be absorbed by Nova Systems and permanently retired." She gasped. "You're not just buying it," she whispered. "You're erasing it." I smiled. "That's right." My father clenched his jaw. "Why would you do that?" I leaned forward, my voice calm. "Because I don't need Caldwell Enterprises," I said. "I never did." His hands tightened into fists, his last shred of pride barely holding him together. "You're just doing this to get back at us," he said. "No," I corrected smoothly. "I'm doing this because some things deserve to die." I picked up the pen again. This time, I signed. And just like that, it was over. The Caldwell era was gone. And in its place, Nova Systems soared. With no competition from my father's failed empire, my company expanded rapidly, securing exclusive contracts that once belonged to Caldwell Enterprises. Their legacy was erased. Mine had only just begun. 3 months later, I received a letter. No return address, just a simple handwritten note inside. "Lauren, I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope one day you'll understand." Signed, Dad. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I tossed it into the fireplace, watching as the flames consumed the last remnant of Caldwell Enterprises. And I smiled, because I had finally, completely, utterly won. 3 months had passed since I erased Caldwell Enterprises from existence. 3 months since I signed that final document, ensuring the name would never rise again. 3 months since my father and sister walked out of that boardroom with nothing. And yet, for the first time in my life, I felt peace. Nova Systems was thriving. With no competition from Caldwell Enterprises, we had expanded aggressively, securing every major client that had once been my father's pride and joy. Revenue, $500 million and climbing. Market dominance, 62%. Status, undisputed leader in the industry. But numbers weren't what satisfied me the most. What satisfied me was walking into my own office every morning and seeing a company built on merit, not nepotism. A company that thrived on innovation, not entitlement. A company that I built without needing my family's approval. But as much as I wanted to move forward, the past had a funny way of lingering, especially when I got the invitation. It arrived in an unmarked envelope, a simple cream-colored card with elegant gold lettering, the Caldwell Family Annual Gala. I had forgotten all about it. For years, my parents had hosted the most exclusive event in the industry, back when they still had power. But this year, my father wasn't hosting it. Someone else had taken over, someone who had bought their mansion at auction after the bankruptcy. The invitation was nothing more than a formality, no doubt sent without realizing who I was. I should have thrown it away. But instead, I made a decision. I was going, not to prove anything, not for revenge, but to end this story once and for all. The night of the gala, I arrived in a sleek, custom-tailored gown, stepping out of my car with the quiet confidence of a woman who had nothing left to prove. The whispers started immediately. I ignored them. I wasn't here for them. I was here for one thing. And then I saw them. My father, my sister. No longer the center of attention. No longer surrounded by powerful executives discussing million-dollar deals. They were off to the side, nothing but faded relics of a name that no longer mattered. I walked toward them, meeting my father's defeated gaze one last time. "Lauren," he said, his voice quiet. "Dad," he sighed. "I suppose this is the part where you gloat." I smiled slightly. "No, Dad, this is the part where I say goodbye." And then I walked away. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because for the first time in my life, I was free.